Hello, friends. Today's interview is with Onjae Malyszka. Onjae is a specialist in psychedelic medicine. Onjae Malyszka. Onjae, thank you so much for being here.
Jeremy, thank you for having me, my friend. I'm stoked to delve into many different realms of conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I love this. I love this. Now, Onjae Malyszka is a certified psychedelic practitioner and brain health coach. Onjae is here to help individuals like you optimize your brain and body to unlock a new level of emotional well-being, mental performance, and physical resilience. With a personalized approach that incorporates psychedelics and holistic health practices, Onjae's aim is to help you through overcoming the shadows of depression and anxiety, conquering cognitive challenges like brain fog and memory loss, inattentiveness, ADHD, and more. It's time for individuals like you to reclaim your brain health and emotional well-being with help with psychedelics and beyond. And Anjay is here to help you. So let's dose. Anjay, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad to have you and tell us what you do.
I'm stoked, Jeremy. Yeah, I help people naturally overcome anxiety, depression, cognitive issues without endless pharmaceutical dependence, masking symptoms, or numbing life away. Like, really trying to get to that root cause of these conditions and being able to implement these tools of psychedelics, of nootropics, of just different biohacking techniques and just other holistic health modalities to truly build back from the ground up and just layer those foundational levels of health and, yeah, be able to help people thrive in the modern age when there's just increasing toxicity and just rampant levels of, psychological distress. So, yeah, that's what I'm here to do.
So when you're talking about psychedelics that people can use that are helping them, what is it that you generally tend to see people working with?
Most commonly, psilocybin mushrooms, our beloved psilocybin mushrooms. And then, LSD is another one. I mean, really in the realm of classic psychedelics that are classic being like the ones that are working on serotonin and the 5-HT2A receptors. And in regards to, say, somebody dealing with depression, psychedelics typically within those classic psychedelics, those that are working on serotonin, they work on receptors that SSRIs don't. And so it has a really unique effect, and that's where a lot of that benefit is coming from for enhancing emotional well-being and helping people really get unstuck and out of, say, a deep state of depression. But there's so many different psychoactive compounds that I've been exploring over the years that, are lesser known. We have LSA found in morning glory seeds and Hawaiian baby woodrow seeds, which are legal, somewhat, it's a gray area, legal alternatives to, your classic psychedelics like LSD, mescaline, and DMT and psilocybin. So, but even still, there's other, plant medicines that are out there that aren't as well known that are starting to get more and more recognition and research behind them. I mean, another thing that I reach for that I help people with is finding those natural alternatives that are, say, San Pedro cactus containing the psychoactive compound mescaline. And more most commonly is peyote, but really is reserved for the Native American church and is an endangered species. So reaching more for the San Pedro cactus, the Bolivian torch are really awesome alternatives. I mean, you can literally find these in garden centers in some places because they are utilized as ornamentals within landscaping. So just an awesome option for people to be able to have more psychedelic accessibility. Granted, the whole legal landscape is shifting. I'm over in the state of Oregon, and with Measure 109 being passed, and the decriminalization of psilocybin, and then Measure 109 is basically a measure that it was put into place for people to, allow access to psilocybin. Um, and so, within this whole model, there are a lot of rules and regulations and limitations, but granted, this is a one step further in the right direction of being able to obviously get this medicine into the hands of the people that need it most. And I feel like, majority of us in the modern day and age could receive some benefit from these psychoactive compounds, especially psilocybin. Psilocybin's been utilized, traditionally for the last, couple thousand years. And so it has definitely a very interesting ethnobotanical um, just whole lineage without throughout Central and South America with a bunch of the indigenous tribes and using it sacramentally um, and within different shamanic practices and whatnot, and just like this ancient medicine now for the modern world. It's really profound.
I could get lost in every single wing of what it is that you're saying because these medicines, and this is something that I've been attempting to explain here, is that we have a very Western centric view in the medical field here, where we're having to go back and study these medicines based upon, Western procedures and so forth, when really, quite honestly, they are the grandfathers.
Definitely.
These medicines are the grandfathers of all medicines, and the new medicine of, Prozac and, these other SSRIs, they're really the new ones that really should be bearing a heck of a lot more scrutiny than these very long tried and true medicines that can really expand the mind. But you said something kind of early on that got my attention. It sounds like one of the things that you do is you help people microdose
Mhm.
psychedelic medicines appropriately for what it is that they're dealing with, what they're wanting out of it. And you even mentioned LSD. Do you help people microdose LSD?
Yes, LSD is definitely a little bit harder to access, and the quality of it has definitely declined over the years. I mean, I'm 28 now. I started experimenting with LSD at a really young age, and it was still, quality and legit, especially utilizing regent tests to make sure that you are obviously having the right psychedelic compound because, so many different analogs and different derivatives and different things are being sold as, quote unquote fake LSD, which can be really problematic, obviously. But with any of these psychedelic compounds, like having a certain amount of reverence for these medicines um, because of their potency, right? Really respecting that, really acknowledging that going into it, and kind of humbling yourself. I mean, I had a really extremely traumatizing experience with LSD at the age of 14. And that was quite earth shattering. I mean, to be so young and at a stage in development where I didn't really have a conceptual model of reality to begin with, and a self identity to be completely and utterly dismantled, right? So, regardless of how profound and how illuminating and transcendental that experience was, at the same time, it was extremely traumatizing. And it's actually something that I've returned back to over 14 years now to integrate that experience because, I was quite obviously reckless as a teenager experimenting with these mind altering compounds. And so I definitely put my hand into the fire and I learned the hard way with this. And, circling back around over these last few years of really intentional psychedelic use, like, um, obviously there's nothing wrong with any kind of recreational use of psychedelics. I definitely condone that as well. But these do hold such beneficial therapeutic potential that it would be a disservice to these compounds to actually really work with them intimately and actually actively engage with the process, take agency, integrate your experience, and coming into it with very intentional. Not to say that you can't have fun, but sometimes it is work, right? It is work. going through this process, and sometimes it can be quite challenging to say the least. Like it can really reveal to you a lot of um, challenging things about yourself that can come through. Just really puts things on blast, right? Of just insecurities that we may have, or wrongs that we've done, and people that we've hurt, and how we've hurt ourselves as well. And really, yeah, it can be kind of interrogate you in a sense, really like getting down to those root aspects of our psyche that might be hindrances, but also lessons to be learned.
I want to start with a bit of a practical question here. Now, your business is helping people understand how to work with their brains
Mhm.
using some of these substances. And so one of the biggest issues that people are dealing with, and I guess I'll just throw a second one in there. I'm talking about anxiety, and I'm going to kind
Mhm.
of throw ADHD in the same bucket
Okay.
there because there's some relation there. And how is it that you work with people? How do these substances work that you found for helping people with anxiety, depression, ADHD, and things like that?
Anxiety in particular can be tricky, um, because of the nature of psychedelics. Can sometimes actually amplify that anxiety, exacerbate it. Some of the research within, well, within the realm of microdosing, obviously there's a long history of more a lot of research within the macrodosing, obviously like standard, psychoactive dose, deeper experiences. With microdosing, it's still the research is in its infancy, and there is some evidence to suggest that in rat models that sometimes LSD or psilocybin can actually exacerbate anxiety, which can be unfortunate for people. But this is kind of through that whole experimental phase. However, there is a lot of benefit with, say, performance or social anxiety, but sometimes with generalized anxiety disorder, uh, it can be, like I said, exacerbating of that. Depression, on the other hand, is definitely something that is obviously more like indicated, with microdosing because of the specific 5-HT2A serotonin receptors that psilocybin and LSD are targeting. And they have like this really compared to, say, SSRIs, where those are primarily targeting 5-HT1A receptors. And so with those 1A receptors, it's really helping you with just like putting up with the shit, right? Just kind of like emotional blunting, not actually being able to, like, say, get to that deep seated root cause of like, okay, why am I feeling depressed? With the psilocybin and LSD targeting those 5-HT2A receptors, it really helps somebody with like these active coping mechanisms of actually like understanding, having that self reflection and self awareness, to actually repattern your brain, really altering your modes of thinking, feeling, and being. And when you can really harness, obviously, the neuroplasticity benefits of psychedelics, like obviously, like neuroplasticity being the brain's ability to actually change and reform, create new neurons, new neural pathways, increasing synaptic density and dendritic density and things like that. Like having all these different, carving new pathways in the brain for being able to achieve a new state of thinking, and having thinking about yourself, thinking about others, thinking about the world around you, and being able to like um, show up in a whole new manner and engage with the world in a whole new way. It really has that mood. I mean, since it's working on serotonin, which is really responsible for our mood, among other things, like it really has that amplification of mood and really being able to help boost more of an optimistic type mindset. But it really comes down to the individual as well. I mean, working with people within the ADHD like community, we see that some people can utilize psilocybin or LSD and being able to help, say, reduce that hyperactivity, being able to actually sustain focus and attention and not have all the nasty side effects that come with amphetamine-based, uh, you know, uh, pharmaceuticals that they're typically being given, right? Like Adderall, Vyvanse, Ritalin's a little different, but it's still within that same kind of category. So being able to modulate serotonin and then, the downstream effects with dopamine and whatnot too. So it's like it's really, really interesting, really unique, and it's kind of like um a different way of targeting. And specifically with psilocybin, when you look at the whole mushroom, there's a bunch of other different, psychoactive constituents to it. Baeocystin is the one that really comes to mind, psilocin. Um, but other constituents that has this synergistic effect. I mean, what's beautiful about psilocybin is it comes in this, beautiful packaged fruiting body, the mushroom in and of itself, like it's rather than just like one isolated compound, it can have more broad sweeping benefits than just say something that's very, very precise and targeted that um, you know might throw things out of kilter,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense to me. And I've personally battled with issues relating to ADHD all of my life, and I'm finding that lion's mane is something that seems to be helping me, particularly in the afternoon when I have a little bit of a attention problem, be able to stay focused. And so with
Mhm.
ADHD, what are the kinds of things that you see help people?
I really see. I mean, like you're speaking to a little bit of the nootropics that are out there, that are more cognitive enhancing compounds. Like I see, well, whether it be in maybe say some more the natural herbal realm of things like bacopa, gotu kola, holy basil, polygala, Chinese polygala, a lot of these, natural nootropics. And then I've even been leaning into more synthetic nootropics that are within the racetam family. So you've got piracetam, aniracetam, Noopept. And the interesting thing about these compounds is that, well, they're not patented anymore. So basically, pharmaceutical industries don't necessarily really want anything to do with them. There's no money in this class of nootropics, um, but they have very low. I guess they have a super high safety profile to them still, even though they're you know isolated pharmaceutical compounds. They have this really, beneficial effect on cognition, on an enhancing mood. I mean, all of them have their own unique flavor and taste to them. Specifically phenylpiracetam. This is one of those nootropics that is a little bit more, I guess, energizing in the brain. It really, but it also helps kind of, tap into flow states a little bit. It really has that effect of really being able to direct your focus and sustain that focus and attention. And so they're working on different things, different neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, serotonin, dopamine, glutamate, GABA, all these different neurotransmitters that can, I guess, direct a certain level of like cognitive experience, with GABA being more of an anxiolytic, reducing anxiety, acetylcholine being more energizing, providing more motivation, and just, yeah, enhancing cognition in a way for boosting memory and word recall and just like stringing together more coherent thoughts. Um, but also too, the benefit that, well, ones that psychedelics have, and even these nootropics of in boosting creativity, boosting, convergent and divergent thinking, and being able to see problems and situations from a completely different vantage point, and allowing you to make, those proverbial light bulbs going off in your head, and just being able to like obviously see something from a completely different perspective than you normally would in your just normal waking state of consciousness, the most common state of consciousness that you are
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. And I think that, what people really think about is the classic big dose effect that is had by these. And these big dose episodes for people can be really, really profound, not just in the depersonalization, which really means going outside yourself and what it is that you see makes up your identity, but also people travel to spiritual realms. I know a podcast host who has had several different experiences that have been incredibly spiritual in nature, that have uh, the ability to commune with animals and plants, and this wonderful experience of total connection with things that it's almost like in our waking, very tangible world here that we just don't seem to quite remember the
Mhm.
ancient part of ourselves. And so, can you talk about the big dose effects of this?
Yeah, that's interesting. And one thing that comes to mind with that is the default mode network, just like
Mm,
these regions in our brains that are really there for self-referencing and for just obviously organizing incoming stimuli within our normal everyday waking state of consciousness. When that network can become extremely rigid and we start seeing obsessive compulsive disorders kind of start manifesting from that anxiety because you're just like constantly ruminating on things, you just have these like mental loops and negative thought patterns that are just pretty incessant, right? And being able to like one break that, dismantle that network down, allowing like obviously new ways of being to actually manifest and take form, right? Because you're not confined to your conceptual model of reality. But even more so, and that there's a lot of interesting research on like where these, I guess, transcendental and spiritual experiences come through. And yeah, I don't exactly know, say, the mechanisms or like, and I don't even know if it's fully known of like why that actually takes place. Because it seems like it's beyond, I mean, it's ineffable, right? The experience that one has, it's like you can't even put any kind of words to the experience because it's so profound and it's so beyond any kind of conceptualization, right? Um, but with having another interesting aspect of these experiences and what it's doing, say on a neurological level, um, and is really this interconnectivity with the different hemispheres of the brain, regions of the brain that might have never talked to one another before. And so I feel like there's definitely a component within that that could be contributing to it, but also like I said, the dismantling of that default mode network and just like amplifying the sensory experiences that we have, because I feel like in this modern day and age, like things just like life gets beaten out of us, right? Just all the responsibilities, all of the loss of connection with ourselves, with the natural world, with community, with just replacing these intimate and intricate ties to the natural world and to other beings, and replacing that with technological devices that have really ultimately um, supplanted that, and we've become extremely dependent on. So I feel like one thing that comes up in a psychedelic experience for me, just kind of pull on my own experience, is like I feel like, especially when I was younger, I had this anticipation uh, for the experience. Like I had a planned out for over the weekend. Like I'm gonna be taking some mushrooms with my buddies, right? Like we're all looking forward to this. We got all this hype, and once you get into it and you just like deepen into the psychedelic experience, you're there and you're like, you realize there's nothing really more to be done. There's nothing, it's like almost kind of awkward in a sense, because like I feel like we're always like running around doing all these things, trying to seek some sort of like identity build up some sort of identity that might have somewhat of a like a higher status, that people perceive us as being, having a higher, greater status or something like that. And when you really like, I feel like psychedelics really peel back all those layers, right? They peel it back to where it's like you're at your like true innate core essence that just like there's nothing else to be done in this moment. Like just to slow down and to like, I don't know, revel in the beauty of life, revel in the beauty of just like communing with others in this space and like ultimately trying to bring a little bit of that essence into our everyday lives, right? And that's where that integration piece really comes into play of like harnessing those insights, those epiphanies, those realizations in the psychedelic experience and being able to effectively integrate, harness, utilize those into developing ourselves to maybe like get back to that place a little bit. I don't know if you're familiar with Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters, but they had all these the acid tests, right? Back in the Bay Area. And this was even before like the hippie psychedelic 60s of like really being able to try to achieve that. I mean, look at Ram Dass or any of these other psychedelic or spiritual practitioners that had utilized psychedelics to achieve this kind of unlock this state of universal consciousness and like yeah, I mean, and I think one thing that is it Ram Dass or Alan Watts? It's like when you they say when you get the message, you got to hang up the phone, right? Because the thing with these psychedelic compounds, they're tools in the toolkit. They're not panacеas or magic bullets or cure alls, but they are tools that we can harness to be able to access this altered state of consciousness for allowing things to kind of come through. We're harnessing that. We're bringing this all in service to the greater development of ourselves to be actually be able to be more in service to our community, to our family members, to our partners, to just the natural world at large too. Because like you were mentioning about that interconnectivity that comes through with these experiences, I feel like it starts taking away from like this me kind of like trip and being able to like, oh my God, I'm so much more than this like skin encapsulated just bag of bones right here, so much more and beyond any and all of these things, and it really reveals that to you and it to experience that it's like I mean I feel like there are people that you know are stuck in this place of that of almost like this narcissistic way of being, and I feel like with the advent of social media and all these things like that have really inflamed that and almost promoted that way of being ever more so, and being able to be cracked open in a way where you realize like, whoa, I'm so much more beyond this like I guess from my first LSD experience, like full ego dissolution, full ego death that I experienced, like there wasn't any Onjay or I or me to actually to begin with. Like it was completely and utterly annihilated, you know. And it was definitely very catastrophic because I feel like I was, clinging to all these different parts and these attributes and characteristics and traits that were just like I saw them just like dissipating and falling away, something that I wouldn't be able to ever get back again, it felt like, right? Because it was just like completely just I feel like being embedded in just to the tapestry of the universe. Does that make sense to you?
It makes more sense than anything you could have said, because I know that when I am in a mid to high dose experience myself, there is this sense of consuming bliss, this total sense of warmth and total sense of peace that that I don't get in the materialist world, that I don't get in my everyday life. Not that my life is bad by any means, it's great, but I don't get that level of connection with me and with the world. And I always come to a place where I just go, this bliss, this total connection with me, this total connection with the universe, this total connection with the land, this total disconnection from the materialist world. What kind of system would not want me to have this experience? Would not want you to have this experience? What kind of overarching system, either economic or political system, would not want me to know myself this way, to have an experience of this nature in my lifetime through things that can grow in my yard and
Mm,
things that I could have complete total control and dominion over to do or not do. What would a system like that want out of me? Well, that system would want me to go to work every day and pay my taxes and and pay my fines, and believe what the news tells me, and these sorts of things. There's this forced conformity when you really come out of something like this and you've been so tremendously expanded, you have that neuroplasticity where you're thinking in different ways and with so much more of your mind, and you come out of this and you go, wow, what kind of system would not want me to know this about myself and about the cosmos and about my ability to truly love and heal myself?
mm,
So
wow.
I know that that's not a unique thought in these, but it's certainly one that I generally tend to have.
Yeah, you're usually expected to get with the program, right? And I feel like when you're in that psychedelic space, this transcendental space, those programs, they go out of the window and you can see them for what they are, of just programs and the way that you've been conditioned and indoctrinated to think and be a certain way. And that's threatening when you're starting to question that. You're questioning the institutions, the authority figures that have put that into place. And I feel like as time goes on, we hear more and more of um, these conspiracy theories of just, I don't know, this man behind the curtain, this cabal or whatever that's really orchestrating this whole system of oppression. But you know, I it, I guess believe more that as humans, obviously, we've always aspired to increasing technology and advancement and progressing and utilizing the tools and the gifts that we've kind of been bestowed. But something is manifested out of this whole process, and some call it the machine, and we do the machine's bidding, right? Because I don't feel like there's this, I mean, yeah, we can kind of see some of these architects, these figures that are, you know, high in the ranks, so to speak, that definitely have a lot of sway. But there's this entity or something that is coming through that I don't know. I mean, what's so weird and the whole dichotomy with this is like the progression of humanity. We've gotten to this point where we just further dehumanize ourselves. It's so bewildering.
Wow, yeah.
As time goes on, like we feel like, oh yeah, this is progress. And I mean, just look at the state of the economy, like just the cost of living, like with all this advancement of technology, it was kind of thought like, oh yeah, even just the advent of the steam engine, like that is going to do the work of 10,000 men. But it's like as time has moved on, we're increasingly like working longer hours. We're more stressed out than ever before. We're just like feel enslaved to this machine. And yeah, there's like barely any kind of leisure time, and we just feel so um so confined and restricted by that. And it's so interesting, but with psychedelics coming into that picture of like kind of turning your eye onto it, and you can kind of see it for what it is. Like you're taking the red pill every single time you're taking some psychedelics, because it's like it's really bestowing, endowing in a certain amount of awareness and wisdom each time. Like you're getting these downloads, and you're like, whoa, things aren't as I thought they were. I've been told things that don't actually match up with the reality of the situation. And yeah, it these institutions, like, they've got a lot, coming for them. And it's unfortunate, though, at the same time we see now with a lot of psychedelics and their therapeutic benefits getting a lot of headlines. The pharmaceutical industries are coming in and wanting to capitalize on this, and they want to make certain analogs of these compounds. They want to make certain derivatives that can be patented, that they can really profit off of. Some want to completely engineer the psychedelic experience out of the compound, which I don't know. I feel like very dangerous when we start playing gods in this sense, and also stripping the life force, stripping the soul out of these things. And that's kind of what it feels like with modern life, right? We're just it's being stripped out of us, and no wonder so many people are in the depths of depression, because it's like there is no life there to be had. It's everything feels so lackluster and black and white, no color. And these with these psychedelics being able to obviously like help us expand our minds, seeing beyond the veils, seeing beyond this whole system of oppression, we can kind of start building ourselves up in a way, our mindsets, to like build resiliency and overcome this. Seeing the things that we are grateful for, connecting with other like-minded individuals, and trying to like tell a new story of humanity, and inhabit that story. And that's where I see like where the evolution and the development of that story comes through the psychedelics. The integration part is like inhabiting that new story.
You use the term that we dehumanize ourselves. I recently did a podcast with a couple. They're called the Wanderlusters, and they are this wonderful couple that they were living the basic Midwestern life. And he worked at a garage and she cut hair, and he got laid off and they didn't know what they were going to do. And so they sold their home, and with their two little kiddos, they purchased a bus, and they travel on this bus all over the place. They have this incredibly successful YouTube channel and Instagram and everything like that. And they are the happiest people I have ever spoken with. Their joy is so completely palpable. You feel it off of them, and they're infectious in that. And it's because you talk about, taking a red pill. They just ducked out. They ducked out. They said, "See you later," and they are living a life that is outside of what we were all told is the way that we are supposed to live. And these medicines have the potential to wake us up to that, to what we are missing. Wake us
Mhm.
up to what we are not seeing. Wake us up to the way in which we are impoverished, or the way in which that we are malnourished
Mhm.
in our world, with our food, in the things that we do, in the titles that we aspire to hold, and these sorts of things. And so I in my opinion, so you have the psychedelics coming onto the scene in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and they become extremely dangerous to a system that wants people to live a certain kind of life, believe a certain thing, vote a certain way, and go fight wars that we're told are very, very essential for freedom and democracy and these things.
Yeah.
And when people were saying, no, that's not real. And then our government was not able to effectively weaponize psychedelics through MK Ultra because it wasn't cooperating with them, um, then we see them this almost 50-year period of time where they are not available to the average person because they are so detrimental to an establishment that needs us to be a certain way. And when you think about it like that, you go, well, gosh, that sounds very conspiracy theorist. Well, not every conspiracy theory is wrong.
There are truths to be had and to be seen within those, you can kind of, yeah, pull these different things that are like, whoa, yeah, you dig deeper into that, and there's definitely a lot of evidence to support it. That's for sure. Um, with that vagabonding couple, sounds amazing. I actually had a couple of my own adventures converting a little short school bus. That's actually what right out of high school. I think what having a lot of profound psychedelic experiences in my youth and revealing so much to me and about myself, learning so much about myself and just like the world at large. Like, I don't know, coming back, I couldn't get with the program. I was very directionless. So the first thing I really wanted to do was travel, and to achieve that, I got a little short school bus, a little blue bus, and was traveling around in that. And then some years passed, and I let go of that one. And my wife and I, before we had gotten married, uh, converted our own Sprinter van. It was an ambulance at the time, and yeah, we had a hell of a time, man. Just breaking that thing down and just like rebuilding this thing from the ground up, and being able to just hit the road and be able to adventure and just be footloose, fancy free, and being able to go against the grain status quo. Like, I kind of just opted out for a long time of just what I was originally expected to do, of like graduating high school and then going to college. But I felt so much pressure and no direction there that I had to start exploring alternatives, which led me to an intentional community over outside of Eugene, Oregon, Lost Valley. Absolutely love that place, and integrated myself a little bit into the community and immersed myself into the community for a time, and learning permaculture design, which is like a systems design thinking approach of with agriculture, and you're being able to kind of like replicate natural ecosystems to be of benefit, obviously, to humans, but obviously to the natural world as well, rather than just monocropping and modern agriculture that relies on so much fossil fuel inputs, and obviously synthetic fertilizers and synthetic nutrients. And then don't get me started on the glyphosate and the herbicides and pesticides and everything like that. It's just contributing to the degradation of the ecology of our natural world, but also our internal ecology as well. But you know what? One thing that comes to mind with the whole conversion of my Sprinter van, that it might be a good point where we can kind of explore what ultimately led me up to the work that I'm doing now,
Yeah.
is that 5 years ago, when I was with my wife in our van, one day I had woke up with just extreme cognitive issues, extreme fatigue, just neurological symptoms like vertigo and pain in my joints and my muscles and just intense migraines. And I was just like, what the hell is going on with me? Because we were having the time of our lives. We were out there, we were adventuring and everything like that. I was doing different permaculture design projects on people's properties, and being able to like kind of travel out of the van, and that's kind of what we were doing for work, of just like going into a place, into a property, and really designing this out with those permaculture principles in mind, and trying to build up like a little food forest garden and things like that for people to build that self-resiliency and that community sufficiency. And so that was like just I was just like side tackled by that. Like, what is going on? I thought I had been taking care of my health up to that point, especially being more mindful than the average, teenager and person in their early 20s, of like really, you know, uh, being very more, health oriented, of being mindful of my nutrition and my movement and my psychological well-being, and engaging in practices like meditation and breath work and things like that. So to have this onslaught of symptoms was just like out of the blue, was so demoralizing. And not to mention, like, going from doctor to doctor and trying to find answers while being just dismissed and validated, not heard. There's just telling me, oh, it's all in your head or something like that. Or, because they're just running the standard, blood panels and specific tests that, weren't actually applicable, weren't all the biometrics that were needed to actually get the data required to actually make a definitive diagnosis, right? And so, yeah, I mean, finally started getting a little bit more traction there, and some leads with other people I was talking to just on social media, reaching out like, "Hey, I'm experiencing all these symptoms. Like, what's going on with me?" Like nobody has any answers for me, and so different integrative practitioners were actually responding and commenting on some of the posts that I had out there, because we had built up a pretty large like social media following with our kind of whole adventures in our van and whatnot. And yeah, it was really awesome to be able to start, potentially getting a little bit of a direction. And so those integrative doctors, naturopaths were like, yeah, start exploring, Lyme disease and even mold toxicity. And, you know, over a period of time, starting to understand those conditions and the complexity of those conditions more, started to go through specific testing that would be more obviously giving us that data required to make that definitive diagnosis. But ran into a situation where I was seeing a practitioner that I went through some maltreatment, which ultimately led to about a 6-month period of being utterly bedridden. I just walking up a flight of stairs, like I couldn't manage it, just like my head felt like it was about to just like crack open, like just so disoriented. The cognitive issues that I was dealing with was so terrifying, because had a hard time just formulating sentences, recalling words, names, phrases of even close friends, and it was just like, I'm 22 years old, 23 years old, like, what is going on? And so even through that whole process, like, how that impacted me, like, my whole kind of identity in that moment too had been dismantled and crumbled. I was once obviously very active and outgoing and everything like that, and then to just have to resort to the bed, and my wife and I, we had to sell the Sprinter van and then move in with my parents. And just, for me going through treatments at that time, I mean, I just felt so stuck and debilitated, while I, obviously saw my friends at that same age as being able to go out, live it up, party, and just, have the world was their oyster, right? And losing that business that I built up with the permaculture design and everything like that, because like I wasn't physically able to actually move forward with that anymore. So, yeah, that really embarked me on this whole healing journey of, obviously addressing, just getting educating myself as much in this space as possible, and trying to understand, okay, the complexities and all these different layers of this illness complex. So to kind of make a long story short, like, was able to eventually get a definitive diagnosis of Lyme disease, but then also mold toxicity, also known as chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is a multi-system, multi-symptom illness, and really impacts a certain like, I guess, subset of the population that are genetically predisposed to having this basically innate immune dysregulation to exposures to a biotoxin being mold, like mold mycotoxins and mold spores, and the Lyme, Borrelia burgdorferi, that bacteria is considered a biotoxin as well. So basically, my whole immune system just went completely haywire. And so with that, just, going from again, I've probably seen 20 plus doctors to date, And so I really, at a certain point, had to become my own physician, right? And take agency over this process, educate myself, do as much research and then self experimentation as possible. I mean, just obviously starting at the foundations, and this is kind of what I take people through now. And we'll get to that in a second. But the foundations is optimizing my nutrition. When had become sick, I realized, oh, well, with that mold exposure, where that mold exposure was coming from was from that first bus that I had been living out of and traveling out of, and was over outside of Eugene. And if people don't know, being in the Pacific Northwest, when you're coming into the fall, it's just gloomy and rainy all day, every single day. The sun doesn't shine for weeks on end. And my bus was just molding over, and I didn't understand the consequences of that, and just how that just completely wrecked my nervous system, just such gnarly, neural inflammation, and setting, this whole kind of cascading effect of all these different systems of my body just going so haywire. And so moving through so many different treatments of antibiotics, antiparasitics, because of the co-infections that come with Lyme disease, like Babesia and Bartonella and whatnot, because ticks are usually just a toxic soup of all these different microbes that can be, a vector and, transmitting into your body. And I wasn't able to actually address that early enough to not, usually going through a couple rounds of antibiotics can, in the acute phase, but I never was able to address that. And then top with the mold being extremely immunosuppressive, basically allows these opportunistic infections to start coming online, like Lyme. Like some people might be bitten by a tick and they might not have any kind of reaction to it because their immune system can keep it in check. Why mold and Lyme kind of go hand in hand with one another, because of mold being so immunosuppressive, and they even take certain mycotoxins from specific molds and utilize them in like organ transplants for people to suppress the immune system so much that the immune system doesn't reject the implant, right? So yeah, I mean, man, going through other alternative forms of treatment like ozone therapy and IV therapies and homeopathic injections and neural retraining and acupuncture, and just go down the list of all these different things, which was extremely challenging on my bank account, because like I wasn't getting the support that you'd think you'd get when paying into the medical system with health insurance and everything like that. But what was such an unfortunate reality is that the mainstream medical field, they don't necessarily give any kind of credit or validity or legitimacy to these conditions, because of how complex multi-system they are and how individualized this process is. It's not like you can just slap just like a one size fits all approach and expect somebody to get better. Like, yeah, there's certain principles and different things that need to be addressed, but like if you're just wanting to just fit somebody into the mold, it's not going to work. It's very bio individualized. And so, I mean, what, like going through everything, every single option, I was just exhausting, right? And throughout this period, I wasn't really wasn't really doing many psychedelics at this time. And so I eventually circled back around to these beloved psychedelics of mine. This bountiful and just abundant history that I've had with them, and these profound experiences, and started to delve back into that. And specifically with the microdosing was one of those tools in the toolkit that was really helping me with my cognitive health issues, with helping me get back more of my focus, more of just my clarity of mind, being able to just string together coherent sentences and being able to actually like, oh yeah, actually think straight. The fog was lifted, the clouds dissipated, the sun was shining through. And obviously the mental emotional turmoil that I had gone through because of like being bedridden for so long and just moving through many years of just every single day feeling just so ill, so fatigued, so disoriented, and especially with people being like, "Oh, you look fine." Like, are quit crying about it. And it's like, dude, you don't know what one day is like walking in my shoes. And so, from all these different fronts, from the medical system at large and validating me, from family and friends, like I had to get returned back to like my truth. And I don't know, like for so long, I felt so indifferent to my body, to myself. I was like, why am I inhabiting this body? And I didn't have the love that I required to do that. And psychedelics being another piece of this, of like being able to reconnect with my true inherent nature and cultivating that self-love again rather than being at odds and battling my body, and being able to reconnect, rekindle that relationship. I mean, not to mention all the benefits that it does have, say the anti-inflammatory benefits on the nervous system. And it's all these different factors, it's all these different practices that come together because like I said, I'm working with people with these psychedelics, and a lot of people are coming to me and they're expecting like a miracle cure. And that's really not the case. It's like all these other different components. Like if you don't have the foundations down of your nutrition and your lifestyle, your movement patterns, your sleep, your connection with community, with yourself, with the natural world, like it's going to be an uphill battle. And not to say that like psychedelics can't kind of kickstart that and maybe like put a little fuel on the fire to like get some momentum going, but really it comes down to a lot of these different elements. So, I mean, this led me on this journey of wanting to understand even plant medicine beyond just psychedelics. Wanted to understand herbal medicines, and kind of embarked on um, a education program, an advanced kind of say apprenticeship in that realm of herbal medicine. And realizing like there's so many beautiful medicines all around us, walking right outside of our front door. It's so beautiful, and those have been neglected for by uh the medical institutions, because it's like, right, they can't patent those things. But being able to recultivate this knowledge and being able to build a deeper relationship with ourselves and the natural world that holds kind of these little gems and these golden nuggets and these keys to unlock our wellness. And it's ultimately through relationship with that. And so I think what really fires me up now is being able to go out into the forest and to be able to identify these plants and build a relationship with these plants, and honor like the medicine that these plants really hold, being able to share that with others. And so yeah, just taking this whole mess and it becoming my message throughout this process has been um I don't know, it sounds cliche, but a blessing in disguise, right?
Your ability to walk through all of this, I'm just really in awe of it here. And so these physical health issues that you had, were you able to use the herbal medicine, the plant-based medicine, to slowly detoxify yourself and get yourself back where you needed to be?
Yes, very much so. I mean, you know, I had to transition from I was very like strict vegan for a long time. and what was ultimately contributing to poor health at the same time,
Okay.
over to a ketogenic diet, especially with how much neural inflammation that I was experiencing. And I don't know if you're familiar with some of the research that they've done with getting into ketosis, ketogenic diets for, say, Alzheimer's related cognitive decline, or dementia related cognitive decline, or just simply age related cognitive decline. So coming from nutrition, of being able to just increase the amount of um, the nutrient dense foods that I was consuming, a lot of organ meats, and a lot of animal products, but also incorporating high amounts of really high quality fats. Things like coconut oil, butter, ghee, tallow, um, things of that nature. But then incorporating e- like even culinary herbs have, we think like, oh yeah, it's just kind of for flavor and whatnot, but you look at the profile, medicinal profile of something like thyme, oregano, and basil, and mints, and everything's within these different families, is just ways that we can start, I guess, having food be our medicine, right? And then exploring more of the realm of other herbal medicine. So I like to make my own tinctures, alcohol extracts or glycerites, and being able to wildcraft things from even I'm over in Bend, Oregon, and so getting a bunch of yarrow and St. John's, and even rose hips and things like that have such a high nutrient density, extremely high in vitamin C and other polyphenols and things like that, and things that the natural world is providing that haven't, I guess, with modern agricultural practices, are the soil composition is so deficient of minerals, and like that's going to be reflected in the quality of our foods. And where if you're obviously sourcing, say, more animal products from a regenerative, uh, farmer and rancher, like there's going to be higher amounts of nutrient density. One of the most nutrient dense foods that you can be consuming are, certain, especially organs of specific animals. But, going down the line from there of, without the assistance that I was having from uh, getting from health insurance, like medical bills just kept stacking up and stacking up. That was just a stressor in and of itself. So, a lot of people along this journey, including myself, really have to take agency in certain ways, and really have to like hack these certain systems in a way of like, creating my own nutraceutical supplement formulas by going just straight to the source of getting like bulk different supplements like magnesium and B vitamins, and I make my own binder complexes of activated charcoal, bentonite clay, zeolite, and especially because of all the incoming toxins that we're exposed to on a daily basis from the foods that we're consuming, the water that we're drinking, the products that we're applying to our skin and everything like that, but also the mold, mycotoxins, those binders bind onto those, and can actually effectively eliminate them from your body, and being able to help reduce that toxin burden and whatnot, to actually ultimately reestablish balance and harmony in your systems, rather than being just so bogged down by toxicity. Not to mention all the heavy metals and the PCBs and BPAs and the PFAS, and it's becoming a major just toxic soup that we are exposed to on a daily basis. I mean, there's certain statistics. I think it's like over 84,000 novel chemicals have been introduced into natural ecosystems, and just like into human ecosystems, of like, the products that we're consuming, or the products that we're applying to our skins, the different, construction materials, and just, everything across the board. And so, it's not to necessarily like scare people, but like, and a lot of people don't take it seriously. I didn't take it seriously until I was completely bedridden and utterly sick. And so having to take it very seriously now, and uh, not coming from a fear-based place, but a place of taking agency, being proactive, and bringing these measures into place. One unique thing that I really love about with microdosing and psychedelics is the neuroplasticity benefits that it has. So there was a period along my healing journey with, being so inflamed in my brain and nervous system that I was extremely sensitive to certain artificial fragrances and different, chemicals and smells, and even electromagnetic frequencies like Wi-Fi and cell towers. Like I would experience just an exacerbation of symptoms when exposed to these things, especially the smells. Like high detergent, like my nervous system was extremely hypervigilant to any kind of incoming stimuli that it deemed a threat. And so what I had to do, like I would get just if I came across just a smell that exacerbated that, like say Tide detergent, that was the one that was like really bad, which sounds absolutely wild and crazy, right? But I would experience intense migraines. My fatigue would become even that much worse. The joint pain and everything like that, mainly because it's like my nervous system is deeming this a threat, and actually kind of the whole aspect of smells. Like we don't necessarily consciously like consciously, how do I put this? Um, we don't think about smells coming in. We don't necessarily process that consciously. It goes directly to our olfactory nerve. And, with our limbic system and our amygdala always kind of being assessing the environment around us for these threats. And so my limbic system was completely just gone out of whack, just extremely, extremely sensitive. So a smell like that would just set off even more inflammation, and, all these other symptoms would just be amplified. So what I did, there's something called neural retraining techniques. My favorite has been the dynamic neural retraining system by Annie Hopper, and is all based on the practices of applied neuroplasticity. A lot of the research coming from Dr. Norman Deutsch and all of his incredible work of actually like bringing neuroplasticity and the whole science of this to the forefront, and bringing more awareness to this, like literally the brain's way of being able to change and to heal itself. Because there, for such a long time, it seemed like, oh yeah, you only have a certain amount of brain cells, and your brain is just rigid, it's just like a computer, and it's whatever.
This is your brain on drugs.
Yes, 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 that too. And so I had to go through what these neural retraining techniques are, is basically like meditation and mindfulness 2.0. And it was a process of actively creating new associations with these uh, these triggers. So whenever I would go, get say triggered, and have this exacerbation of symptoms to these say the Tide detergent, the smell, I would go through this specific system of practices, kind of like mind body, kind of like these specific movements and gestures, and you go through this process, and then you would put yourself in a previous experience, a memory that is very emotionally uplifting, very even if you're in that place of such great discomfort in your body and everything like that, and then you're projecting yourself into the future of being exposed to this trigger and not being sensitized to it. I would envision myself like out on this awesome vacation with my wife, and like you bring all your senses into the experience. Like what are you smelling, what are you tasting, what are you feeling, like trying to fully embody that place and embody that experience. Because really, like your brain and nervous system can't necessarily tell the difference, right? I mean, think about just like watching a movie, and you're having this very stress, or you're like a scary movie or something like that. Like you're having this response, like your nervous system doesn't know if you're actually like experiencing it, or it doesn't know that it's just being projected onto this film, right? Onto this device. So there's these physiological processes that are taking place that are being obviously intimately controlled by our minds. And so being able to project myself into that future place without being triggered and having that response to that thing that I was sensitized to, like over a period of time, what was known as incremental training, I was able to do this applied neuroplasticity of like just thinking about the sensation of getting triggered by that Tide detergent and being able to move through those practices, get to that place of uplifted emotional state, all the way to the point of like putting my nose just deep in the Tide detergent bottle and just taking the biggest huff and whiff of it as I possibly could. And going through that process and desensitizing, reprogramming, reassociating that trigger and that nervous system response. And what was cool was that it had carryover to those other things that I was sensitized to, which is just so profound. I mean, and it took a lot of work. It was an hour each day. I did it over a period of 5, 6 months and beyond, and then kind of slowly tapered off because of like just the benefits that I was experiencing throughout that process of like calming my hypervigilant nervous system.
Mhm.
And so when you're pairing something such as psilocybin, small doses of it, LSD, that are amplifying and enhancing that process of neuroplasticity, like you get there a lot quicker because it's just laying down this and priming this neurological environment that can actually change, repattern, reassociate, just reduce that inflammation, create the neurons that fire together, wire together, and being able to capitalize on that.
So this is something that isn't really considered common knowledge. I was just doing a marriage therapy with a couple recently that are having a lot of pretty major issues with communication and getting along and these sorts of things. And I said, listen, the both of you need to envision as if it's like that old Indiana Jones movie where you've got the rope bridge that's between two cliffs and you're on it together and the ropes are going to hold you, but there's those wooden slats and you have to walk on the wooden slats because if you fall, you're going to die. And the wooden slats are training yourselves to relate to each other in a positive way. It's recognizing each other doing something right. It's recognizing why you love that person and verbalizing it. It's love, respect, it's connection. And if you choose that you're not going to live that way, you're going to fall through those cracks because the rest of it is all the cracks in between, and you're going to fall into the depths of darkness and it will not stop, and it will end with the two of you not being able to be together. So if you want this, you have to retrain your brain to look for the stair steps that take you all the way to safe ground. And that is exactly what you're talking about. It's the retraining your mind to go, I could sit here and I could recognize every messed up thing about this person. I could tell them about it. I could make them pay for the things that I think that they've done to me. I can take them all the way down and make sure that they know how bad they've hurt me. Or we could decide we're going to work together. We're going to recognize the good in one another and we're not going to fall into the canyon. So it is that retraining of your mind. It's that ability for you to retrain the way that you think, the way that you relate to the world,
Mm.
and doing that for the goodness of your own health, for the goodness of relationships, for the goodness of who it is that you want to be, for the goodness of children that you are teaching to live in this crazy little world, and that sort of thing. So it's really, we have the power to do this, and too many people are married to their trauma.
Mm.
They're defined by their addictions. They travel the same highway every single day and go, how come I'm not getting to a different destination? Well, did you try traveling a different highway? Did you try breaking it up? Did you
Exactly.
did you try retraining your mind to not think that you're just a stupid person and that maybe
Mhm.
everybody else is stupid too, or these sorts of things? So, you're talking about incredibly powerful things that are absolutely within the capacity of any individual. But
True.
people just generally choose to travel the same highway every day.
Exactly, Jeremy. I mean, you're speaking to just the difference between taking an active role and taking a passive role,
Yeah.
right? And the passive role is easy, right? But is it actually going to get you to where you want to go? Like, actually stepping up to the plate and realize and taking a stance and being an advocate for your own well-being and actually having your actions in alignment with that to fully engage with the process. I mean, that's what I do with people coming into just my brain health and microdose coaching process is like, how, because it is so easy to just opt for that passive role, even with the microdosing or the different herbs and supplements and different things like that. Like, it's so easy just to like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take my dose for the day and just like put it back. But it's like, what are you actually? Because there's neuroplasticity benefits are to be had with the microdose, but it's like, are you still just in the same routine and pattern? Or are you just kind of solidifying that even more so? Like
Right.
it's and because we've been taught and conditioned to believe, by the pharmaceutical industry that like, yeah, just pop a pill and it'll make, take all your worries away, which it's so far from the truth. And it's obviously clearly evident, like especially here in the Western world and in the US in particular, it's just like increasing rates of antidepressant use and anxiolytic use and antipsychotics and like all these different things and opiates and all these other different things to just kind of numb ourselves. And it's so easy, yeah, just to, pop it and just hope for the best, hope that it's going to make you better. Right. But this process, in contrast, is like, it has to be done actively. I mean, yeah, you can hem and haw, and you can, try to take, shortcuts and roundabouts, but you're gonna be spinning your wheels. So being able to actively engage with the process, with these different retraining techniques, with all these other different lifestyle factors that are going to be contributing to, your well-being. I mean, look at depression and like seeing, okay, yeah, there are so many different factors, physiological, neurochemical, like there are different factors that are contributing to this. But the main narrative is like, oh, chemical imbalance. And they're typically talking about neurotransmitter imbalances. But it's like looking at the degradation of our gut ecology and looking at our microbiome to begin with is like such like the epicenter for all these different other physiological neurochemical processes that are taking place. Like a lot of these precursors of these neurotransmitters are to be found in our food. They're going to be found in the production and just like the biodiversity of our gut ecology and how that there's this bidirectional relationship between our gut and our brain, and they're sending information back to one another. And so if you're eating just shit food, a bunch of processed crap and the stuff that's just riddled with herbicides and pesticides and different antibiotics and hormones and different things like that, then it's like it's going to be impacting your psychological well-being because how it's decimating your gut ecology that is kind of ultimately responsible for your brain health and your mental emotional and in turn your mental emotional well-being. So it's like, like there's all these holistic systems that we need to address to actually get to a state of wellness, balance, harmony, and resiliency. Because it's like, yeah, there are a lot of internal threats, external threats that are impacting us, whether that's on a physical level, but also mental, emotional, and psycho-spiritual level as well. So integrating and weaving all these different components together is just like it's imperative to like actually live well and with vitality moving through these times ultimately.
You do an amazing thing for people. Can you talk about how you work with people, what you recommend, what it's like to work with you and your practice?
Yeah, so within my kind of holistic microdose coaching process, once I get connected with somebody, we go through a whole deep dive, health assessment and just initial consultation to really rule out if there's any kind of, say, contraindications. Because I do have a lot of people coming and are on certain antidepressants and anxiolytics and different psychotic medications, antipsychotics. So really making sure that we aren't going to be running into any problems with negative drug interactions there.
Yeah.
but also just really assessing their constitution. I'm really just gathering as much data and information that I possibly can. If people have relevant labs, obviously I can't say order specific labs for people, but the information that I usually am able to gather is sufficient to really help build somebody out a whole microdosing protocol. But let's talk about, like, say, sourcing and accessibility. So I do take people through a psychedelic sourcing strategy session. And, this isn't about like going to, down the street to the park and finding your hippies in the park trying to find some, some mushrooms or something like that. Like, there are natural legal alternatives that we can turn to, that are, good options for microdosing. Granted, they take a little bit more work, and they're not necessarily on the same level as, say, your classic psychedelics like LSD or psilocybin. But even in that realm of analogs of, say, LSD, access to, there's a bunch of different analogs within that kind of whole LSD family of, like, 1P LSD, LSZ, um, a couple different ones that haven't been scheduled, and so they're research chemicals. However, accessing those can be tricky, and you really want reputable sources. But really, there's other ways of cultivating, obviously, psilocybin mushrooms. It's not illegal to have a mushroom grow kit or access psilocybin spores. So that's an option for people. But then, I don't want to go too deep into this, but there are a bunch of companies that and reputable vendors that are in decriminalized areas that are stepping up to the plate and wanting to provide psychedelic accessibility, psilocybin accessibility to people. I'm over in Oregon, so another aspect of, say, psychedelic accessibility is going through kind of the model here. You can't necessarily go to, say, like a cannabis dispensary, that same model of, like, being able to, like, go pick up some ganja, right? Like, this is a whole process of working with a facilitator intimately, going through preparation, administration, and integration, this kind of whole process at a licensed facility. But, there's definitely, you know, I don't want to just be the microdosing coach that just is giving you information. Like, I want to be taking steps to actually, like, apply this information and this knowledge, right? So, like, obviously it's foundation. Like, we could talk about the benefits of microdosing all day till we're blue in the face, but if we're not actually doing it, then it's like we're not going to have that therapeutic benefit. So that is a main focal point of when I'm working with people, of, like, that psychedelic accessibility. Moving on from there, building out someone out a complete microdosing protocol that is in service to what I call the bioharmonizing blueprint of, taking, really assessing somebody's mindset, nutrition, lifestyle, movement patterns, their environment, their purpose, their connection, like all these different factors, and building, like, a whole system and protocol, and framework around them to be able to. I mean, I think the beauty of microdosing it too is that the way that it primes the neurological environment, like, it helps with new habit formation and adherence to new habits, which is really interesting. So it's basically in service to, like, hey, if you had a hard time of, like, modifying your nutrition or altering your mindset or your lifestyle, it's like this can help you and maybe, support that adherence to that even more so. Like, you're just a little bit more open, flexible, suggestible in the sense of, like, being able to bring more health promoting habits and just ways of being into your life, and being able to, like, solidify those. And so then we work together over a period of 90 days plus, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, depending on somebody's level of care that they require, and really equipping them with the tools to be able to obviously get to a greater state of mental emotional well-being, physical well-being, but also that resilience moving forward. Having the tools, the techniques, whether it be those neural retraining practices, or, optimizing nutrition, or what have you, different herbs, supplements, and understanding, okay, like, what does my body need to be able to thrive? Like, the whole saying of, like, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man a fish, he eats for a lifetime, right? So like that whole process there of really equipping somebody with those skills, with that knowledge, so they could become agents of their well-being.
Yeah, yeah. This is the way that you work with people in this super careful, everything considered sort of way. I think it's a really responsible way to work with people. I know that for me, I'm seeing more and more licensed medical professionals who are becoming aware of and interested in, and certainly varying levels of willingness to publicly acknowledge psychedelic medicine. Are you seeing that sort of thing on your side?
I definitely am. I mean, I feel like we're all coming in concert with one another. I was even actually like kind of talking to my father about this a little bit more, because he's still kind of confused. Everything that his generation, being from the boomer generation, like, not necessarily understanding this, always, going through the war on drugs and all these propaganda campaigns and everything like that. I mean, he recognizes the therapeutic potential. I'm sure he gets a little uncomfortable when he's telling maybe family, friends, or just family
Right.
about what I am doing, and how I'm working and engaging with people. But yeah, I'm definitely seeing that on varying levels of the whole medical field and industry of people becoming more and more attuned to this, more and more in the know, and obviously wanting to have this for their patients, right? Because I mean, like, they're ultimately coming from a place of service. If there's something that is super outdated, that's actually not moving the needle forward, and if something else comes along, granted it being a little kind of taboo and still in a weird little gray area, like, uh, I mean, the whole oath that many doctors take going into the field of like doing no harm, how is that not a disservice to your patient if you're not actually getting them a medicine that might be really beneficial to them, but just giving them something that is just like kind of keeping them stuck, kind of just like masking a little bit of symptoms here. Like, they're not actually living or thriving. They're just kind of getting by. And I am more a proponent of getting to a place where we are able to achieve a certain level of vitality and be able to fully, I don't know, just revel in the beauty of life, because and feel good in this process. Like, but shit's tough. Things are challenging, and like, but
Right.
to face those head on, it's not just like, you know, uh butterflies and daffodils and, like, just little fairies. Like, it's about taking a real stance and actually, because it is a disservice of just masking symptoms and never getting to that root cause. And to heal it, you've got to feel it, and feeling it is can be extremely, extremely uncomfortable. But I think that's one of
That's
the
what
biggest
people are
thing.
afraid of.
We need to get out of our comfort zones to actually like start fully living. And so, I mean, the thing with the psychedelic experience is so profound and is so beautiful, but sometimes I'm not like right out of the bat, like, am suggesting, recommending, or like prescribing that to someone of like a big macrodose experience. I'm almost like, if you can, let's go out into the woods for a few days, like unplug, maybe fast during that time, like actually reconnect with yourself. Just take out all of these external inputs and this incoming stimuli that is really just kind of making us feel so awkward, and pulling us from one direction to another. And that in and of itself is a profound transcendental experience that, I mean, from the constant connection, quote unquote connection, that we're having with these devices. Like, it's beautiful that, Jeremy, that we're able to like sit and have this conversation right now. Beautiful technology. But at the same time, like, how detrimental it is for our mental emotional well-being to always be just like deeply plugged into the matrix. And so that might be something that I work with people. I mean, especially being in person of like, I mean, I work with people all over the nation and even in Canada as well because of certain psychedelic accessibility options that we have. Um, but gosh, man, I feel like that's one thing that we're so deficient in as society because it's like we have gotten to this level of technological advancement that has really, like I said, that kind of even just that dehumanizing nature and quality, not even quality, just characteristic aspect of this. It's like we don't even acknowledge our true wild innate nature that we have and our intimate ties and connection with nature. Like we become so decoupled and abstracted from that reality. So and we become so numb, so numb to like coming back to what you were saying, like in your everyday waking life, it's nice, you know, like you just there's definitely some aspects to it that you are really appreciative and grateful about, but our sensory experiences have been blunted and they're numb. And so getting back out into a natural setting and communing with the land, connecting with the land, unplugging, like that's another way that we can have a reset of our nervous system and a reset of just our spiritual aspect and qualities of our being. That in and of itself is just is medicine and something that I am an advocate for. And because sometimes it's like taking somebody that's has been so deeply embedded into the kind of status quo and the current paradigm and taking them into a huge macrodose journey, that might be too much for somebody to bear at times. And it can be like coming from my experience of like almost a trauma in and of itself. And especially with people that are having, you know, complex PTSD, like we got to be treading water carefully when explore, you know, advancing into this realm of practice. So, I mean, that's just one thing of like having respect for the medicine, respect for the person that you are working with, and yeah, really doing your due diligence to provide the highest quality of care, not getting your ego wrapped up in the process of like what you think that they need. Like, I don't know, having this be a very collaborative process because I mean, just coming back from having that self awareness that somebody might gain from like unplugging a little bit, like we want to trust that. We want to honor that because like they're on their own unique healing journey. Like we can point them in the right direction and like we can kind of help hold their hand. But it's like ultimately, like they got to open up that door and they got to walk through and, you know, not forcing anybody through that process.
Onjay, thank you so much for coming and having this conversation here. Deeply meaningful and enriching conversation about so many different things. Just having your thoughtful perspective and what you bring to so many people. Just thanks for coming and talking about that.
I appreciate you having me here, Jeremy. It's been just a kick-ass time being able to connect, collaborate like this, and just to, yeah, peel back some of these layers and just explore and have fun. That's what I'm all about here.
Me too, me too. And we're gonna have all of the ways that you can get in touch with Onjay in the description of this podcast, wherever it is that you're watching or listening from. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to Mindful Mutiny. It really helps us with growing this whole platform of having great conversations. And in a lifetime, there are more decisions than anybody could possibly count. Living the highest form of yourself is the most rewarding thing that you can do. Make incredible, positive, risky, and bold decisions to live the highest version of you. Now go be something great.